The story begins with a girl named Aubrey Parker, who attends the funeral of her friend Grace Ross. She is deeply affected by the loss, and her mind drifts through random memories, thinking about a night she spent on the beach with a man. During the wake, she can barely focus on the conversations and feels nauseous upon seeing her friend's widower, a man named Mark. Overwhelmed by the situation, she decides to sneak away, but just then a group of people suddenly surrounds her. One of them recognizes her face, and they all seem excited to see her in person. However, Aubrey speaks to no one and walks away quickly. A woman approaches and introduces herself as Alice, one of Grace's English cousins. Her eyes widen when she hears Aubrey's name, as she didn't know she was speaking to someone so close to the deceased. Noticing Aubrey trying to leave quietly, she mentions that a letter from Grace arrived. Alice says her cousin had become obsessed with a certain rhythm lately, and always said Aubrey would understand it. Instead of going home, Aubrey heads to Grace's restaurant, the Golden Gourd. She pushes the key with a stick, sliding her hand through a small gap to grab it, and enters the empty kitchen. In the dining room, she studies every detail as if trying to relive memories and prepares herself a drink. She grimaces at the first sip, speaks as if Grace were there with her, and wonders how she could enjoy it so much. She then feeds the aquarium animals and a turtle named Bellini. Afterwards, Aubrey goes to the rooms where Grace used to live. A telescope strategically placed by the window offers a perfect view of a couple, and Aubrey laughs, imagining her friends spying on the neighbors. She decides to stay the night, plays music, and takes a shower before facing the empty bedroom. Beside the bed is a radio that crackles from time to time as if someone were trying to communicate. She lies down and grabs the radio, says her name, and calls the unknown person on the other end, but only hears static. Unable to sleep, she plays with the switch, turning the light on and off until she senses Grace's presence in the room and has the impression she's lying next to her. Feeling a bit uneasy, she changes her mind and lies on the couch, thinking about the couple next door to distract herself. But then, the memory of that night on the beach returns to haunt her, ruining the moment at once. Still awake, she decides to call her mother, who asks how the wake went and insists Aubrey should visit her soon. The call suddenly begins to cut out, and neither of them can understand each other. Telling her mother she can't hear anything, she says goodbye and wishes her a happy new year. When she finally falls asleep, she has a terrible nightmare about a man named Edward. He is sitting with his back to her, and when she calls his name, he slowly turns his head, revealing a huge hole where his face should be. Aubrey wakes up startled and realizes she is very cold, as the heater seems to have turned off overnight. Through the window, she sees it snowing, and the city looks eerily quiet, with no one on the street. In the distance, a column of smoke rises from somewhere in the forest. The Christmas lights she turned on the night before are now off, and the TV won't turn on either. Up to that point, it could just be a blackout due to bad weather, but she finds it strange that not even the phone is working. She puts on a jacket and goes to the backyard to turn on the emergency generator, startled by a noise coming from the street. At this point, she already suspects something strange has happened in the area and decides to check the restaurant's front door. Seeing nothing unusual, she goes back inside and closes the door. But then someone suddenly appears and slaps the glass with both hands, as if asking for help or trying to warn her. The stranger immediately runs off, barely giving her time to recover from the shock, and she rushes out to chase him. She loses sight of him after running a few blocks, and it becomes clear that something very serious has happened. 2 columns of black smoke rise among the houses. Cars are parked chaotically along the street, and several objects are scattered in the snow, along with what looks like a trail of blood. Following it, she finds an abandoned car with the door open and red stains on the windows. When she reaches a corner, Aubrey looks to the side and freezes at the sight of a strange creature. The thing slowly gets up and makes a chilling, gurgling sound. As Aubrey flees from it, we see people inside nearby homes watching her from their windows. The creature reaches the restaurant door a second after Aubrey manages to shut it and begins growling on the other side. Scared and confused, she crawls under the tables and curls up behind the counter, listening as the monster moves closer. The glass quickly starts to crack while the creature slams against the door, and suddenly a man's voice calls her name. Feeling around the counter, she finds the radio and responds to the person, who starts giving her instructions. The man tells her to close her eyes and aim the radio at the door. With no time to ask questions, Aubrey stretches her arm with the radio in hand, afraid to leave her hiding spot. However, the man insists she must get up and walk toward the door, where the monster is still pounding the glass. He also makes it clear that Aubrey must not open her eyes under any circumstances. Gathering all her courage, she obeys and starts walking toward the door with small steps and her eyes tightly shut, pointing the radio at the enemy. Gradually, the banging becomes weaker and more spaced out, until the only sound in the air is a peculiar noise coming from the radio. When she opens her eyes, she sees the creature is truly gone and falls to her knees, exhausted. The man speaks again over the radio, recommending she go upstairs and lock the door. As if all this wasn't strange enough, the cutlery now begins to float inexplicably. Aubrey remains terrified but is calm enough to focus on the mysterious voice and ask how he knew her name. He says he's a friend of Grace and reveals that all of this is related to her. Aubrey asks how he drove the creature away, and he confirms her suspicions that the sound was a specific signal for that purpose. He says Grace discovered something and that the first part is right there in her house. This intrigues her, but her curiosity turns to desperation when she sees other people outside. She warns the man that others are in danger, and he replies there's nothing they can do. Aubrey gets angry upon hearing this and grows even more anxious when he says he has to hang up. Alone again, she starts to wonder if maybe she's dead, and this is hell. Just then, she notices an envelope on the shelf with her name written in Grace's handwriting. Inside is a cassette labeled, "This recording will save the world." She plays the tape and Grace's voice begins telling a story about a group of people who made a discovery. They found a hidden signal in a radio broadcast and Grace decided to help them search for similar ones. This revealed several transmissions secretly emitted, always coinciding with catastrophic events. All the signals are connected, but number 7 is missing, and no one has found it. Admitting she fears it may fall into the wrong hands, Grace says she hid the tapes in the places they used to visit, and used musical clues to mask the signal. After hearing the message, Aubrey has a vision in which she's alone in the bushes, and alien sounds begin to surround her. When she picks up a stone from the ground to defend herself, the vision ends, and she's back in the restaurant hitting a poster on the wall. This opens a hole in the paper and reveals a compartment behind it, where she finds several notebooks. She begins to study Grace's notes, and the mysterious man calls her again on the radio. He says his name is Alfred, and urges her to be very careful with the transmissions, as everything suggests the signal may open some kind of portal. It was through one of them that the creatures arrived last night, although they seem to fear the signal themselves. Aubrey asks if the rest of the people have disappeared, and Alfred says some may simply be hiding. He admits he doesn't have all the answers and doesn't even know the signal's origin. It might have been transmitted for centuries by an expanding civilization, just waiting for the right sequence to activate. As Alfred speaks, Aubrey notices that all the words he's saying are written in the notebooks before her. When he finishes his explanation, Aubrey says she always dreamed of seeing the earth empty, just bricks and trees, no distractions. Alfred finds this odd and begs her to help finish Grace's work, but she just turns off the radio. Realizing she'll be living there for a while, she arranges things her own way, and her mood slowly begins to improve. Despite this, we see a rope tied like a noose hanging from the ceiling on the second floor. To avoid staring into nothing during her sleepless nights, she sticks a cheerful drawing on the ceiling. However, the very next night, she wakes up with one of the aliens hovering above her and starts hitting it frantically, until she realizes it was only a nightmare and she's striking the wall. Sometime later, the food runs out, and Aubrey tells the turtle, now her only companion, that the water is also running low. It's time to decide if she'll fall into the same paranoia that consumed Alfred and Grace. Listening to the tape again, she starts to find more clues about what really happened and concludes that Grace built something capable of reading the signal. However, the experiment only worked after Grace was already infected. This happened the first night Aubrey stayed at her house and probably triggered the larger catastrophe. Finally, overcoming her fear of going outside, Aubrey takes the turtle and the portable tape recorder in case she needs to play the signal to defend herself from aliens. Dressed in a fur coat, she walks through the same streets as before, but now no one is in the windows and a bloodstain covers the glass. Her first stop is the street supermarket, where she resupplies the pantry. Trapped under one of the shelves, she finds the tape marked as number 3. Before leaving, she sees blood drops on the floor, forming a trail that leads to the freezer. Inside, she finds someone frozen, who seems to have died days ago. After leaving, she walks past one of the monoliths that mysteriously appeared the day of the invasion and sees several buildings partially destroyed. Then the gurgling sound starts, and Aubrey hides behind a car, watching the creature through the windows. Unable to control her fear, she flees and even drops the recorder in her panic, but manages to retrieve it before the beast reaches her. She crawls into one of the abandoned cars and plays the tape while the alien shakes the vehicle without stopping. Huddled in the front seat, she sinks into a fantasy world that ends up resembling her own, where monsters are also chasing her. Just like in the nightmare with Edward, she sees a child with his back turned and tries to approach, but he also has a hole where his face should be. The fantasy ends under the sea, with long algae pulling her away from the light. Aubrey wakes up under the car, and seeing the alien is no longer near, she picks up her belongings and continues her pilgrimage to the places she used to visit with Grace. At the cinema, she sits in her usual seat and finds the tape hidden beneath it, which turns out to be number 4. As she leaves, she sees a gigantic creature passing by, glowing with colorful light under its skin. Despite her amazement, she's captivated by the majestic being and watches until it's safe to move on. It's already night when she reaches the library and finds the door locked. After breaking a window, she lights a glow stick to find her way to the shelves. She panics when the light suddenly goes out and quickly lights another, stumbling upon a creature. However, this one is different and doesn't seem to notice her. Aubrey crawls toward the dropped recorder and presses play, continuing her search cautiously. Tape number 5 is inside a box in the study room, where she lies down to sleep between a wall of books. In her dream, Grace appears beside her and says Aubrey is showing signs of psychological issues. When she talks about losing touch with reality, Aubrey asks if the alien invasion is just a product of her imagination. Crying, she says she feels so guilty that she hasn't wanted to leave her friend's house since she arrived. She apologizes for not being there in Grace's final days, and her friend tells her she must also forgive herself and face the mistake she made that night on the beach. Later, Aubrey listens to one of the tapes and sees some books floating in the air. No longer sure what her mind is creating, she imagines herself in various places until a noise in the library pulls her back to reality. She hears people talking and passes by a film crew, noticing the clapperboard says, Starfish. Below, a group discusses the film's scenes, and one of the people is a girl identical to Aubrey. The idea of being just a character in a movie is too much for her, and it pulls her out of the trance. She realizes she's still wearing headphones and is sitting among the books in the mezzanine. The rest of the tape takes her to several other scenarios, the last of which is on the beach, where she sees herself walking toward the man waiting in the sea. Present-day Aubrey tries to stop her past self from continuing, but she trips and falls. Edward is sitting on the sand crying, and her voice won't come out when she tries to speak to him. Angry, she approaches the other man, who is now turning into one of the creatures, and shoves him into the water. Back in the library, she feels sick after the experience and decides she's had enough tapes for the day. As she continues her path, that different creature appears once again. When it collapses on the ground, The membrane surrounding it tears open and a creature just like the others emerges. Aubrey stands a few meters away, pressing the button on the recorder and simply watches calmly as the monster walks away. A few hours later, dawn breaks and Aubrey passes by Grace's grave before beginning the long walk to the radio station. Tape number 6 is stuck behind a photo of Aubrey with a colleague. Knowing that the radio is the final stop in the treasure hunt, she plays all the tapes in order, broadcasting the full set of signals in the hope that it will make some difference. Once the last tape ends, she says her name and pleads for someone to answer. A child's voice begins to speak moments later, and Aubrey is overjoyed to learn he's with a group of people, having feared she was the last survivor. She tells him she transmitted the signal in order and that it should have closed the portal for good, just as Grace had planned. However, the boy replies she should never have sent a message without knowing what it was and tells her she only made things worse, opening a new passage instead of closing the previous one. Still, Aubrey doesn't seem to hear him, as it's precisely then that she realizes the labels on each tape spell out the phrase, "Forget and forgive." Outside, a massive dome is forming between two monoliths, and Aubrey starts walking in that direction while the boy keeps calling her name, alarmed to see she no longer answers. As she approaches, she sees that it's made of droplets of mud under the effect of reversed gravity, and she decides to let herself be pulled in by the same force, floating along with her memories.